Hi, my name is Bill Frangos. I'm going to do a little instructional video right now for you. We're going to tie an Elk Hair Caddis. This is one that we used to call the purple haze before people started tying purple Adams dry flies. What I'm going to do is start the thread about 3/4 of the way up the hook shank. Wrap forward, wrap back over it. I'm going to let it lay a thread base down. I'm going to wrap all the way to the end of the hook shank. I can tell I'm at the end of the hook shank when the thread hangs down directly over the hook barb. If I go any further back than that, what ends up happening is you will then be tying into the curved part, which we don't want this to actually go into the curved part of the hook. So we're going to tie that all the way back to the end of the hook shank. At this point, I'm going to tie in some wire, and I'm going to have to look on my bench to grab it. There we go. I'm going to tie in a piece of size small, silver wire. If you notice, I put it at about a 45-degree angle between the hook shank and the thread that's hanging straight down. I get a couple wraps over it, then I can lay it down, follow it up, cover it, come all the way back to the tie-in point, which is at the end of the hook shank. I've let out about 2 or 3 inches of thread, and by doing that, what I've done is I'm preparing to actually put some dubbing on. What I'm going to use for dubbing is Ice Dub UV Tan. It has those purple hues. If you look at the dubbing itself, it has little purple UV hues in it, which will give it that, why we called it the purple haze originally. I'm going to take a little pinch of that. Normally with dubbing, anytime you're dealing with dubbing, you take a little pinch, and most people put on way too much dubbing. When I say a little pinch, it really is a very little pinch. What I'm going to do is stretch that dubbing quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more thread out of my bobbin. With any dubbing, you always twist one direction. The key to dubbing is holding the bobbin securely, pulling down a little bit, and I'm going to get a little closer to the fly here. When I pull down, you can actually see the hook bend a little bit. You want to have that thread tight. That's one of the keys to dubbing. The other thing is you always dub one direction. You spin it one direction. And I'm crushing these fibers with my thumb and forefinger. I started at the top and worked to the bottom. You can start at the bottom and work to the top. If you go both directions, ordinarily I would say never do this, okay? The exception to that rule would be with ice dub, because ice dub is very difficult to get a tight dubbing on there. There's several methods to actually make it tighter, but once you've crushed it, as we did where we did it, I'll come back to spinning it one direction, and it's pretty nice tight little dubbing loop. What a dubbing loop does is it takes this material, this ice dub, and it secures itself around the thread, but not to the thread. So if you look, I can pull it down or slide it back up. because it's secured to itself around the thread. And that's really all dubbing does. I'm going to go ahead and slide it all the way up to where it contacts the hook shank and do a wrap at that point. Now, if I want this dubbing not to be very fat, I can hold the dubbing and the thread together. Normally, I would hold the bobbin. I'm going to bring this up to where you can see. Normally, I hold the bobbin here lightly. But where I'm going to try and dub this tightly, I'm going to hold the thread and the dubbing together. Every time I make a wrap of thread, the thread twists, and it twists that dubbing a little bit tighter because I'm securing the dubbing at the same time. So you can see that is actually very tight on the hook right there. And it corded it. Now, when I let go, if I just wrap the dubbing like I would normally wrap dubbing, see how it lets it, permits it to splay out a little bit and become a little fuzzier. And that's, you know, that's just something to know when you're starting out tying. I'm going to zoom back in here. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and attach a piece of hackle. And I'm going to show you how to prepare the hackle first. Get us back in focus. I've got a piece of brown saddle hackle here. This is a whiting. It's actually a little bit smaller than should be for this size hook, which I particularly like. I like it a little bit smaller than would normally go on. And you can see the thread barbules don't quite make it. They don't quite make it to the to where the hook point is. Let's try and get that in focus. There we go. So it's a little bit smaller. What I've done is I've separated these barbs by stroking them down towards the butt end of the feather. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim right along the hook, right along the stem on both sides. It's easier when you're doing this without a camera strapped to your head. And what that's left is a few barbules you'll see right here and right here. And that's what's going to connect when you tie this in. That'll hold the thread. It'll hold it on there real good. It'll keep it in place. No issues. If you have a little bit left over of the stem right here, you can trim that out. If you can see it. And then I'm going to put a little thread base here. That's going to be useful later. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this. I hold the saddle straight up. I'm going to do 2 full wraps right at the tie-in where the end of the material is. And then I'm going to start angling backwards. So you see the angle that I'm at right there? I'm going to do open spirals all the way back to where the wire is waiting for me. Once I get back to where the wire's waiting, I'm going to wrap the wire forward. So I took it straight up, come straight down, reach up under my bobbin here, pull it straight back up. Now I've got it trapped. I can let go of the hackle. I'm then going to take the wire and do loose spirals. And if you notice how I'm wiggling, that'll keep the barbules from the hackle from getting trapped, or too many of them from getting trapped. And it does a counter rib. And by counter ribbing, what it's doing is it's literally crisscrossing. So when I went back with the feather, I went over the top this way. Okay. So from here around behind and then over. And then when I went from the back, I did it the same direction, but it counter wraps when you do it going forward or backward on the hook. It'll counter wrap. I'm going to go ahead and trim off that back end. I've thrown a couple of wraps over the top of the wire, okay, to tie it down. I'm going to then pull the wire backwards and throw a couple of wraps in front. That's a locking wrap. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and crimp that wire a little bit right there at the tie end just by hitting it with my thumbnail. And then I'm going to hold the hook shank so it doesn't wiggle in the vise and weaken the hook, and helicopter the piece of wire off. That was pretty simple. So now what I'm going to do is prepare some elk hair. And I've got a package here of Nature Spirit Cow Elk. This is Select Elk. I'm going to take a pinch of that. So I'm going to pull this off and show you how we prepare it. I'll come up to the hair itself and let me zoom back in a little bit so you can see this. I get a little pinch of this hair, and I'm just going to pull off a little bit just by tucking the scissors up under it and lifting up an amount. And it doesn't have to be a great amount. I'm going to come in with my scissors and trim that off close to the skin. Okay. Once I've trimmed that off, I've got to get rid of the underfur, which all deer and elk have. Underfur is the fluff, the things, we call it belly button lint. This is great if you've got cats. They can follow these little fur balls around on the floor. And, we have a trash can right next to me that I'm going to go ahead and drop that into. But what I do is kind of spread the individual hair follicles and pull any of that fluff out. If I do that, when I put it in to stack this hair, which I'm going to stack the tips. These are the butts. These are the tips. I want all these tips lined up. I'm going to use a hair stacker. And what you do is put those into the hair stacker and kind of wiggle them around to get all of the individual hairs in there, drop them in, and then I wrap it on top of my knuckle. I do that because when you wrap it on a table, it drives people crazy. It makes it a lot of noise. If you've got other tires, watch the fly. if I do this on my tying bench, it makes my other tires' flies jiggle. So, you know, it's just a courtesy. I then tip it up just a little bit and twist the bottom and pull it off. And if you look there, those hackle fibers will be stacked. The tips will be just about perfectly even, which is a good thing. I'm going to then grab those with my left hand. Switch hands, put it in my right hand because I need to measure those. So you see those tips are all even? That's what we want. The way I measure, I will literally put this up against the hook eye, and that's where I want to cut it. So I'm going to switch it back, and I got it right on the first try. To the left hand, notice I just touched fingers. I'm going to make a cut right here against my fingers. It's going to be a straight cut. I'm going to look down into the wastebasket. Do a straight cut. And bring this back over, and now I've got these pinched tightly in my fingers. I'm bringing this straight back over to the eye of the fly. Bring this a little closer. Okay. And if you look right now, I've got the eye of the fly and the hair tips lined up with each other. I've got a little base of thread. Okay, and I'm just going to clean that up, and I'm going to put that thread right in the middle of the base. Line that up. I'm going to do a pinch wrap. A pinch wrap, I bring the thread straight up. That's where I want it to tie down. I'm going to then rock my fingers forward and pinch my thread. Now, at this point, you see how I can let go of the tension on the thread? Anywhere else, if you let go, it's going to come unraveled. But because I've got it pinched in that position, it won't. I'm going to bring it down the back side of the hook straight down. And I'm going to give it a good snugging pull. See how the butts of the hair are starting to flare a little bit? I'm going to come up, do another pinch wrap, come straight down the back side, and pull harder. Now the butts are really starting to flare. Now I'm going to go ahead and just wrap over it once, twice, okay? And now I'm really putting some torque. And you see those butts are flared real well? I'm going to keep that torque on. I can let go of the back hair. If that wing's in the right position, which it is, I'm going to go ahead and flip these butts up a little bit and do a couple of wraps underneath. At this point, I can whip finish, and this fly is done. And it will have everything exactly where I wanted it, and be a very durable fly for a lot of fish. It's going to float like a cork. And since I don't use head cement, I'll throw in a couple of whip finishes. So there's 2 whip finish. Trim my thread. And that fly is complete. So if you look, and I haven't massaged it, I haven't done anything to it, it's got a good delta shape, okay, which caddis have a good delta shape. Doesn't have a lot of stray fibers down here. It's got a good head built. It's got a good profile. The eye, for the most part, is clear. You can use your thumbnail and push that back a little bit further, and it'll clear it out to where you can get to your eye much easier. And fact is, had I done that as I was tying it, it would have been even cleaner than it is now. But as it is, that's a very functional, usable fly. Give me your comments. Tell me what you think of these videos. If you're happy with them and like to see more, subscribe. I'm Bill Frangos, the Fish God 1A. Thank you. Bye-bye.